Scott Price, SL Price from Sports Illustrated, was in Boston yesterday, wasn't up there to cover the marathon, still up there in Boston. All of a sudden, he's covering the marathon, or at least the aftermath of that, and SL is kind enough to join us. Can you describe yesterday, SL?
Well, it was first off, it was a beautiful day, perfect running weather, and there was a report early on before the race. I woke up and there was a report early on about just how important this race is to Boston economically, and how the success of this race, what it means to the city and the money it can bring in, as well as, of course, the sort of tradition and the spirit of the Boston Marathon. And there are runners staying at my hotel. People were incredibly excited. Their families were there. Everybody was in an incredible mood. And look, the Boston Marathon is sort of Wimbledon. It's the Masters of marathons. I mean, it's got an incredible tradition, and yet it's got an incredible hometown and cozy feel to it. The volunteers are great. People wait 5 years to be volunteers. They sign up, and they're just incredibly helpful. Everybody loves this race. And, of course, what I'm going to say now is trite, but, two bombs go off, and the entire mood, obviously, completely is riddled and destroyed. It was mass panic, and it was betrayal, really of the mood of the race. And I think as we go forward, there's going to be, aside from the recrimination and the obvious investigation, a real fear and wonder over what's going to happen to the race and the feel of what is really a part of the Boston and sporting family in America.
What was your hotel like with all of these runners who were staying there?
Well, it's like a low-grade festival. I mean, there's a great buzz in the air, and Dan, I'm sure you've experienced as well for sporting events. When people come together for a sporting event, it's not just obviously the athletes, and of course, and I'm not talking about a professional event. The Boston Marathon is full of amateurs and family members and people who really train and think their whole lives to get to this moment, because it's one of those few things where a regular guy or a regular Jill or girl or has a chance at the big time, and I don't mean to win the race, but to feel part of an iconic event. And so it's not just one person. Their wives, their kids, their spouses, their parents, siblings. Everybody comes together because it's such an important moment. And so you have that entire sort of feeling of that, and not only that, but it's international. I mean, you have people from Canada and all over the world coming in, every state. It's a real gathering, and it's an incredibly positive gathering, because there's both a personal feeling of fulfillment and an athletic feeling of fulfillment at the same time. That's something that running does that really few other sports do. It unites both the professional and the amateur in a very tight bond. And so there was a wonderful feel for it. And then coming back at the end of the day, it was completely different. People were trooping in, having walked back from the site, or maybe they'd hailed a taxi after waiting 30 minutes, but really a lot of them walked back even after 3 miles after finishing the race. And I wouldn't say there was a real sense of panic in the air, but everybody was sort of scrambling to get out. A lot of them to see if they could make it out of town, and a lot of them had planned to do so beforehand. But there definitely was a feeling of let me get out of here. But I will say this, at least for the moment, one after another said, I've qualified for next year. I'm going to be here. Now I think that's, in some way, it's bravado, and people may rethink it as sort of the events of the day settle in over time. But it was gratifying to see in one way, I have to say.
I immediately thought of the Atlanta Olympics.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the first thing that came to mind when I realized what it was, that these pipe bombs go off, And you had 2 people die in Atlanta, 1996. Were you there covering that?
I was. I was not in Centennial Park that night, but I did write about it. I was woken up in the middle of the night and started working on the story. You're absolutely right. I would also. I mean, I lived in D.C. during the D.C. snipers. I live there now as well. It struck me like both those events much more so than, and again, I don't want to take anything away from the victims. A lot of people are comparing it to 9/11, especially with the 2 bombs and the second bomb sort of suddenly making everybody realize this wasn't a fireworks display or a crashing grandstand. It truly was bombs going off. That and people have equated to that, and I certainly understand it. But I certainly got the sense that you did that this wasn't. I don't want to say amateur. I don't know what the heck a professional bomber is, but it certainly felt a little more ad hoc and a little more rudimentary than something incredibly well organized. And I'll tell you that now they're saying that there were only those 2 explosive devices. I think part of what lent the idea that this might be a very sophisticated operation was the idea yesterday. They were saying they found 2 other unexploded devices and perhaps up to 5 to 7 devices. But police today emphatically said that there were only those 2 that went off. Again, I do not want to minimize the damage or anything, but I agree with you. It did feel very much like the Centennial Park bombing, and the fact is if you remember, that bombing was to go after not the hard target of the Atlanta games, the security part. Centennial Park was sort of a wide open venue where people could gather who didn't have tickets, who didn't make it through security, and this is exactly the same type of thing. I mean, it was sort of put into a public area, not where the racers gathered beforehand, where I've been told there were snipers on roofs, or at least police on roofs and guard dogs, and people spoke very strongly about there was a strong police presence throughout the race, and security was good, but you can't shut down. You can't secure the area of a race when it goes through 27 miles, and you have people in bars and gathering on sidewalks. It's just impossible. And the other thing is that I've covered nearly 10 Olympics, I think, at this point, and terror. And I was going to Athens over and over in 2004 because that was the first summer games after 9/11, and everybody really felt, because of its proximity to the Middle East, and because of the time frame, that the Athens games were going to be a real target for terrorists. And over, terrorism experts were telling me, the beginning of the games, everybody's ready, but you got to get more and more nervous as time goes on because everybody relaxes by the end of the event. And I think a little bit of that applies to something like the marathon. I'm not suggesting that security let down, but I'm just saying that the end of the race is sort of a more bedraggled, less organized thing just by nature of the race and people coming in at different times, and there's this feeling of completion, and so I don't know if that's why, for example, bombs were set at the end of the race as opposed to the beginning when supposedly there'd be more impact because there'd be more people gathered at the time, but or whether they thought that at the end there'd be a little bit more vulnerability. But clearly they did this at a time. It was set at a time when the more recreational runner was going to go through, not the elite runners, and their families. And that's one of the disgusting things about this. I mean, among many others, is that it seemed to be designed for maximum damage to the most innocent of people. There's talk about ball bearings and other pieces of shrapnel inserted in these bombs. I mean, obviously, any bomb that goes off is damaging, but there seemed to be a real extra premium placed on extreme savagery, and mission accomplished for whatever lunatic did this.
SL, we appreciate it. No, you got more things to write for Sports Illustrated. We look forward to reading those.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, SL Price, Sports Illustrated. Sports Illustrated cover. I didn't know if it was going to be Masters related or not, but I'm sure that shifted. The magazine closed last night, so as far as the cover goes, I'm going to guess it's going to be the Boston Marathon.